When her husband abandoned her in labour, a single wrong number reconnected her with the man she betrayed. But fate wasn't just giving her a saviour, it was giving her a second chance at the life she threw away. Clara Jensen's world was too quiet that night. The kind of quiet that makes your heart beat louder, that makes every breath sound like a confession. She sat on the edge of the couch, one hand on her swollen stomach, the other gripping her phone. The contractions were coming faster now, sharp, deliberate, and merciless. Come on, Ethan. Pick up. But Ethan Ward's voicemail answered again, his voice smooth and detached. Leave a message. I'll get back to you. She knew he wouldn't. He never did. The living room around her glowed with the cold light of luxury, marble floors, designer lamps, and walls that looked perfect but felt hollow. Everything Ethan ever gave her came with a price tag and a warning, don't complain. Another wave of pain hit, stronger this time. Clara gasped, clutching the coffee table to steady herself. Sweat beaded on her forehead. She was terrified, not just of the pain, but of the silence. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor. The screen cracked. A faint sob escaped her lips. For a moment she whispered to herself, almost like a prayer. Please, not tonight. Not like this. She tried calling her husband one last time. The line went dead after 2 rings. Somewhere miles away, Ethan Ward was sipping champagne in a coastal villa, his laughter echoing against the ocean breeze. He had told her he was in meetings. His meeting was with another woman, a woman who didn't know that while he poured her wine, his wife was home alone, fighting to stay conscious. Clara's knees buckled. She fell to the floor, her breath ragged, her vision fading. The sound of the rain outside blurred with her heartbeat. With the last bit of strength she had, she crawled toward the door, fumbling for her car keys. If Ethan wouldn't come for her, she'd take herself to the hospital. Headlights cut through the storm as she drove into the night, her phone buzzing uselessly on the passenger seat. The hospital's bright lights loomed ahead like a promise. But before she could reach the entrance, her world tilted. The pain took over completely, blinding, consuming. As the doors slid open, she collapsed against the marble counter, her voice breaking into a whisper. My baby, please. Then everything went dark. The next sound she heard wasn't Ethan's voice. It was a stranger saying softly, Ma'am, you're safe now. We've got you. The world returned to Clara Jensen in fragments, muffled voices, the rustle of a curtain and the steady rhythm of a heart monitor. Her eyelids fluttered open, and for a moment she didn't know where she was. The last thing she remembered was the marble counter. And the pain. A nurse leaned over her, warm eyes, steady hands. Nurse Ilara, her badge read. Her voice was calm, like someone used to holding chaos together. You're going to be okay, sweetheart, Ilara said gently. We've got you stabilised. Your baby's heart rate looks strong, Clara's voice trembled. Did you call my husband? Ilara nodded. I did. The number on your emergency contact. He didn't pick up. But don't worry, I left a message. Clara closed her eyes. A wave of exhaustion swept over her. Ethan never answered when she needed him most. Why would tonight be any different? Outside the room, Nurse Ilara frowned at the clipboard in her hand. The phone number didn't seem right. Maybe 1 digit off? But it had already connected. She'd left the message. It was too late to change it now. Lucas Reed sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by open notebooks and a half-finished cup of coffee. The ringtone startled him, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. He hesitated, then pressed play on the voicemail. Hello, Mr. Ward. This is Nurse Ilara from County General Hospital. Your wife is here. She's in active labour. We need you to come immediately. The message ended. The name echoed in his head, Ward. But the voice in the background before the line cut, he could swear it was Clara. For a few seconds he just sat there, frozen. Clara Jensen, the woman who'd once promised forever, then disappeared without goodbye. His breath caught in his throat. 5 years had passed since she walked out of his life and into Ethan Ward's. He had built walls, buried the hurt deep under new beginnings. But now she was in danger. He grabbed his keys. The decision wasn't rational. It was instinct. He didn't even know if she'd want to see him. Maybe she'd scream, maybe she'd turn away. But none of that mattered. When someone you once loved is in trouble, you go. Nurse Ilara checked Clara's vitals again. "We're getting close," she said softly. "You're doing great." Clara tried to smile, though her face was pale, her body trembling. She whispered, "He's not coming, is he?" Ilara didn't answer. Instead, she squeezed Clara's hand. "Someone will." Minutes later, footsteps echoed down the corridor. The automatic doors slid open, and in the white glare of hospital light stood Lucas Reed, breathless, eyes wide with disbelief, and something else. Fate, it seemed, had dialed the right number after all. When Lucas Reed stepped into the hospital, the sterile air hit him like a wave, sharp, cold, and full of memories he thought he'd buried. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to care, and yet he did. He moved down the corridor with purpose, scanning the faces of nurses rushing past. His heart pounded, his mind still struggling to accept the possibility that it could be her. At the nurses' station, he stopped. "Excuse me," he said breathlessly. "I'm looking for—" Before he could finish, Nurse Ilara turned. She recognized his voice from the call she'd placed earlier. "Mr. Ward?" she asked. Lucas hesitated. The name stung. "No, my name's Reed. Lucas Reed." Ilara's brow furrowed. "Reed?" She flipped through her clipboard. "You're not her husband?" Lucas shook his head. "No, I'm just someone who knows her." "Is she okay?" Something in his voice, the raw concern, the quiet desperation, made Ilara pause. She studied him for a moment, then nodded toward the end of the hallway. "Room 214, but keep it quiet. She's resting between contractions." Lucas swallowed hard and walked toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last. He paused outside room 214, his hand trembling on the doorknob. Inside, the dim light fell across a pale figure in the bed. Tubes, machines. Her hair damp with sweat, her breathing shallow but steady. Clara Jensen. 5 years melted away in an instant. He saw her again, the woman who used to laugh too loudly, who danced barefoot in his kitchen, who said forever like she meant it. And then he remembered the last thing she'd said before she left. "Ethan understands me in ways you never could." His jaw tightened. But when Clara stirred, all that bitterness faded into something else, something softer, something achingly human. She blinked, eyes fluttering open. For a moment, confusion clouded her face. Then recognition hit her like lightning. "Lucas!" Her voice was barely a whisper. He nodded, stepping closer. "Hey," he said gently. "You're okay. You're safe." Tears welled up in her eyes. "What are you— How did you—" He managed a small smile. "Wrong number." She almost laughed, a fragile, broken sound. "Of course." Outside the window, thunder rolled. Inside, time stood still. Lucas took her hand, his fingers wrapping around hers, grounding her through another wave of pain. "I've got you," he said. "You're not alone." Nurse Ilara peeked in, watching quietly. There was something sacred about the scene. The way two people, broken by choices, were suddenly aligned again by chance. When she stepped away, she murmured under her breath, "Sometimes fate fixes what pride destroys." As Clara drifted into a fitful sleep, Lucas sat by her side, watching the monitors flicker softly. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He only knew one thing for certain. He wasn't leaving her again. While Clara Jensen laboured through the longest night of her life, her husband, Ethan Ward, was miles away, the glow of a tropical sunrise spilling over an oceanfront villa. He leaned back in a lounge chair, one arm draped casually around a woman who wasn't his wife. Her laughter chimed through the air like music, while his phone, face down on the table, buzzed again and again. He glanced at the screen once, frowned, and then flipped the phone over. "Work?" the woman asked, sipping champagne. Ethan smiled, that practiced, charming smile he'd perfected over years of lying. "Nothing that can't wait." Clara's body trembled as another contraction ripped through her. She gripped the side rail of the hospital bed, tears streaking her cheeks. Nurse Ilara stood beside her, adjusting the monitors. "Deep breaths, honey. You're doing beautifully." Across from her, Lucas Reed sat quietly, his eyes never leaving her face. Every flinch, every breath, every tremor, he felt it with her. When she squeezed his hand, he didn't hesitate. He leaned closer and whispered, "You're stronger than you think, Clara. Just a little longer." She wanted to respond, but the words caught in her throat. Her heart ached, not just from pain, but from the realization that the man who should have been here never would be. He lifted a glass to toast the morning, his watch glinting in the sunlight. "To freedom," he said lazily, while the woman beside him smiled without knowing she was toasting another woman's heartbreak. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail notification. Ethan rolled his eyes and played it on speaker for a laugh. "Mr. Ward, this is Nurse Ilara from County General. Your wife is in labour. Please contact us immediately." The woman's smile faltered. Ethan's expression barely changed. He ended the message, smirked, and said, "She's fine." She's always dramatic. Then he poured another drink. Hours passed. The rain outside turned to a dull grey drizzle. Clara's hair clung to her forehead, her breathing shallow and uneven. Lucas never left her side. He fetched ice chips, adjusted blankets, and whispered encouragement she didn't know she needed. At one point, when a nurse struggled with paperwork, he quietly handed over his credit card. "Whatever she needs," he said. "Put it on there." Ilara watched him, recognizing the look in his eyes, a mix of pain, devotion, and something deeper. She had seen husbands show less care for their wives. When Clara finally rested, her hand still clinging to Lucas's, Ilara leaned toward him. "She's lucky you came," she said softly. Lucas shook his head. "No, I think I'm the lucky one. 2 worlds. One built on lies, the other reborn from love that never really died. And though Clara didn't know it yet, by morning, one of those worlds would collapse completely." Clara Jensen's breaths came in ragged gasps, each one stealing a fragment of her strength. Her body shook violently with the next contraction. Every muscle, every nerve screamed. "You're doing amazing, Clara," whispered Lucas Reed, leaning close, his hand gripping hers like a lifeline. "Just a little longer. You've got this." Her eyes fluttered open, barely registering the face beside her. For a split second, her heart threatened to stop, the realization hitting her. He was here. Not Ethan, not the man who promised forever and abandoned her in the darkest hour. Lucas brushed damp hair from her forehead, his thumb lingering on her cheek. "You're not alone." "I'm right here." Clara's lips trembled. She wanted to speak, but her words dissolved into a breathless moan as the pain surged again. The monitors beeped in rhythm with her frantic pulse, the room filled with urgency and tension. "Nurse Ilara, status update?" Lucas asked, his voice steady but low, commanding without anger. "She's strong," Ilara replied, glancing at Clara with admiration. "But this baby is determined. Looks like we're going to meet her very soon." Clara clutched Lucas's hand with all her remaining energy. His warmth anchored her, pulling her through the waves of agony. And then, the moment arrived. The room seemed to hold its breath as the nurses guided Clara through the final push. Her body screamed, her vision blurred, and for a heartbeat she thought she couldn't do it. "Just one more time," Lucas murmured, his eyes locked on hers. "You can do this. You will do this. And then—" A cry pierced the tension, shattering it like sunlight through clouds. A new life announced itself, Clara's eyes filled with tears, hot and unstoppable. Nurse Ilara placed a tiny bundle into her arms. The weight was delicate, yet it felt like the centre of the universe. "Her name?" Lucas asked softly, leaning close, his voice trembling with awe. Clara looked down at the baby, marvelling at the tiny, perfect features. "Maya," she whispered, a small smile breaking through the exhaustion. Lucas's hand rested on hers, both of them tracing the outline of the child together. "Maya," he repeated. "She's beautiful. Just like you." Clara felt a rush of emotions she couldn't name, relief, fear, joy, and sorrow all tangled together. But above it all, a sense of profound love filled the room. Love that didn't abandon. Love that fought through the darkness. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight streamed through the hospital windows, bathing the room in a warm golden glow. It felt like the world had paused just for this moment, A pause that allowed love, hope, and new beginnings to take centre stage. Lucas leaned closer, brushing a gentle kiss on her temple. "You did it, Clara. You were amazing." Clara's lips curved into a weak but genuine smile. For the first time in years, she felt safe. She was no longer alone. And for Maya, her world, and the world of the woman who had loved too deeply and been betrayed too harshly, was just beginning. Ethan Ward lounged on the terrace, sunglasses shielding his eyes from the sun. His phone vibrated insistently. Another call from the hospital. He ignored it. Another beep. Another ignored. The world of champagne and laughter felt distant, almost fragile, as if something he couldn't see was unravelling just beyond his reach. "Hey, babe," he said to the woman beside him, waving off the phone. "It's nothing important." But the moment the call ended, the world he thought was under control shifted. Lucas's eyes were stormy with controlled fury. The number he'd dialed wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. The man had abandoned Clara Jensen at the moment she needed him most. And now Lucas intended to make him face it. He dialed. The line rang. Ethan answered with his usual charm, masking irritation with casual ease. "Ethan, this is Lucas Reed," he said, voice calm but edged with steel. "I'm at County General Hospital. Your wife, Clara Jensen, is here. And yes, she's safe. But you've been missing in action." Ethan blinked, processing the voice. "Lucas, what?" Don't play dumb," Lucas interrupted. "You weren't here. You didn't care. You left her alone when she was giving birth to your child. And now, you're going to hear something very clearly. She doesn't need you. I'm taking care of her. I am taking care of her, and you've lost the right to pretend otherwise. But she's my wife," he protested weakly, the casual confidence drained from his tone. Lucas's voice hardened. "Not anymore. Not in any way that counts. You abandoned her. You weren't there when it mattered. She's alive. The baby's safe. And if you want any hope of seeing her again, you'll have to answer for your choices. Otherwise, stay away." The line went silent. Ethan stared at the phone, helpless and pale against the villa's opulent backdrop. For the first time, the consequences of his selfishness hit him like a tidal wave. He knelt beside her bed, brushing hair from her forehead. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I promise you, no one's taking you away from me, from us." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She didn't need him to say more. She didn't need reassurances from the man who had left her alone in pain. She only needed Lucas, only needed the one who had fought to be there. Outside, Ethan slumped in the chair, flowers untouched, champagne forgotten. The reality of his choices was a mirror he couldn't escape. And for the first time, he understood what it truly meant to be absent. Inside the hospital, sunlight streamed through the windows, reflecting on the peaceful, exhausted faces of Clara and her daughter Maya. Lucas held them close, the quiet hero of a story that was finally his to protect. Ethan Ward lounged on the terrace, sunglasses shielding his eyes from the sun. His phone vibrated insistently. Another call from the hospital. He ignored it. Another beep. Another ignored. The world of champagne and laughter felt distant, almost fragile, as if something he couldn't see was unravelling just beyond his reach. "Hey, babe," he said to the woman beside him, waving off the phone. "It's nothing important." But the moment the call ended, the world he thought was under control shifted. Lucas's eyes were stormy with controlled fury. The number he'd dialed wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. The man had abandoned Clara Jensen at the moment she needed him most. And now Lucas intended to make him face it. He dialed. The line rang. Ethan answered with his usual charm, masking irritation with casual ease. "Ethan, this is Lucas Reed," he said, voice calm but edged with steel. "I'm at County General Hospital. Your wife, Clara Jensen, is here, and yes, she's safe. But you've been missing in action." Ethan blinked, processing the voice. "Lucas, what?" Don't play dumb," Lucas interrupted. "You weren't here. You didn't care. You left her alone when she was giving birth to your child. And now you're going to hear something very clearly. She doesn't need you. I'm taking care of her. I am taking care of her, and you've lost the right to pretend otherwise. But she's my wife," he protested weakly. The casual confidence drained from his tone. Lucas's voice hardened. Not anymore. Not in any way that counts. You abandoned her. You weren't there when it mattered. She's alive. The baby's safe. And if you want any hope of seeing her again, you'll have to answer for your choices. Otherwise. Stay away. The line went silent. Ethan stared at the phone, helpless and pale against the villa's opulent backdrop. For the first time, the consequences of his selfishness hit him like a tidal wave. He knelt beside her bed, brushing hair from her forehead. You're safe now, he whispered. I promise you, no one's taking you away from me, from us. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She didn't need him to say more. She didn't need reassurances from the man who had left her alone in pain. She only needed Lucas, only needed the one who had fought to be there. Outside, Ethan slumped in the chair, flowers untouched, champagne forgotten. The reality of his choices was a mirror he couldn't escape. And for the first time, he understood what it truly meant to be absent. Inside the hospital, sunlight streamed through the windows, reflecting on the peaceful, exhausted faces of Clara and her daughter Maya. Lucas held them close, the quiet hero of a story that was finally his to protect. Months had passed since the chaos of Clara Jensen's labour. The once sterile hospital halls were replaced by the warm glow of her new home, filled with laughter, sunlight, and the quiet rhythm of a family finally whole. Maya, now a few months old, cooed happily in her crib. Her tiny fingers reached for the mobile above, her bright eyes reflecting curiosity and wonder. Clara watched her from the couch, a soft blanket draped over her shoulders. For the first time in years, she felt at peace. The pain of the past, Ethan's neglect, the loneliness of her marriage, the fear during labour had been replaced with a profound sense of safety and belonging. Lucas Reed entered the room, carrying a basket of freshly folded laundry. He smiled, setting it down gently, and walked over to sit beside Clara. Morning, he said softly, brushing a lock of hair from her face. Morning, she replied, a genuine smile lighting up her features. She slept well? Lucas nodded, glancing at Maya. Like an angel. You two are perfect. Clara reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Thank you for everything. For being here, for saving me, really. He shook his head, his eyes tender. You didn't need saving. You were strong the whole time. I just got to be there to remind you that someone loves you enough to never leave. Outside, the city moved on. But inside this home, a new rhythm had been created. A rhythm of love, trust, and stability. Clara had named their daughter Maya, a name Lucas had suggested early on, and it had stuck instantly. They laughed together as Maya hiccuped, Lucas gently bouncing her in his arms. The sound of her giggles filled the room, a sweet melody of hope and second chances. He scrolled through a news article. Family celebrates baby's first milestone, mother and father thrilled. His face went pale. The family he had ignored, and the woman he had abandoned, thrived without him. The reality hit him harder than any confrontation ever could. He had lost his chance for redemption, and it was irrevocable. Clara cradled Maya in her arms, looking up at Lucas. I never thought I'd be this happy. Not after everything. Lucas kissed the top of her head gently. Happiness isn't about the past. It's about what you choose now. And I choose this, she whispered, holding him close, then lowering her gaze to Maya. Us. Family. Love. Lucas nodded, eyes shining. Always. Forever. No one will ever take this from us. The camera pans out slowly from the cosy living room, the golden light spilling across the walls, Maya cooing in her mother's arms. Lucas beside them, a family reborn from the ashes of betrayal and heartbreak.